Li Jun walked through the noise and color of the Cygnus Prime starport. He was a man from Earth, a place still new to the great community of stars. All around him, aliens of every shape and size moved about their business. A tall, slender being with gray skin and large black eyes glided past. A creature that looked like a walking pile of rocks clanked by, speaking in low, grinding sounds. The air smelled of strange spices, hot metal, and things for which Li Jun had no name. He did not look like a man who belonged among the stars. He was not a famous soldier or a rich trader. He was a xenobotanist, a scientist who studied alien plant life. He was a quiet man with a calm face, and he felt most at home not in giant metal stations, but in quiet green places. Here, in the middle of all this chaos, he sought out the only green he could find, the market stalls that sold flora from across the galaxy. His current interest was a glowing blue fungus. It sat on a vendor's table, pulsing with a soft inner light. The vendor itself was a multi-limbed being named GRX, who chattered away in a clicking language that Li Jun's translation earpiece turned into basic galactic common. Very rare. From the moons of Xylos, glows with the light of a dead sun, Eric said, waving 2 of its 6 arms. Li Jun did not reply immediately. He leaned in close, but not too close. He observed the fungus. He noted the texture of its cap, the pattern of the gills underneath, the rhythm of its light. He had learned that patience and observation were more valuable than credits. The light is a chemical reaction, Li Jun said, his voice quiet but firm. It attracts the sporefly of Xylos for pollination. It is not from a dead sun. Garek stopped its chattering. Its many eyes blinked. This human knew things. For a scientist, then, a special price, Garek said, its tone shifting. Li Jun nodded. He began the slow, polite dance of haggling. He did not get angry. He did not demand. He simply stated facts about the fungus, its commonality on Xylos, and its actual market value. He was respectful but firm. After a few minutes, a price was agreed upon that was fair for both of them. Li Jun placed the fungus carefully into his sample case. He gave a small, respectful bow of his head to GRX, who clicked in surprised approval. This was Li Jun. Calm, observant, methodical. He was a man who talked to plants, and in a way he listened to them too. High above the market, in a private viewing room that overlooked the chaos, another being watched. This was Kalar. If Li Jun was a student of life, Kalar was its master's thesis in death. He was a bounty hunter, and his name was whispered with fear in every shadowy corner of the galaxy. His body was a masterpiece of lethal design, sleek, powerful muscles covered in a dark, chitinous armor that absorbed the light. His face was long and angular, with eyes that were solid, dark orbs showing no emotion, only calculation. He did not move like the creatures in the market below. He was stillness and silence given form. A data stream floated in the air before him, a list of names and prices. He was finishing a job. A corrupt official from a water world had thought he could hide in the ice caves of Tantalus Ferrer. He had been wrong. Kalar had found him. The job was clean, efficient, and profitable. As that job closed, a new communication arrived. It was a priority message flagged with the highest level of encryption. Kalar opened it. There was no video of a client, no name, just a contract and a picture. The price attached to the contract was astronomical. It was more than most beings would see in 10 lifetimes. It was the kind of price reserved for planetary governors or rogue fleet admirals. The picture was of a young human male. He had dark hair and calm eyes. He looked soft, fragile. The name read, Li Jun. Occupation, xenobotanist. Kalar felt a faint flicker of disappointment. It was beneath his skills. This was not a challenge. It was an errand, a soft, hairless ape from a backwater world. He had killed dozens of their kind before. They were weak, their bodies easily broken, their spirits even more so. They died just like all the others, but a contract was a contract. And the price was too significant to ignore. Perhaps the client simply had more credits than sense. Kalar tapped a single sharp claw on the image, accepting the job. The target schedule, pulled from the station's public logs, showed he was due to take a transit pod from the central hub to the human embassy sector in 17 minutes. That was all the time Kalar would need. Li Jun left the market, his sample case held securely. He felt a slight tickle in his throat and sniffled. The constant climate control of the starport always seemed to give him a slight cold. It was a minor annoyance, a reminder of home. He weaved through the crowds, heading for the transit hub. He was thinking about the fungus, about the tests he would run back at the embassy lab. He was not thinking about danger. Why would he? He was a botanist. Kalar moved like a shadow through the service corridors. He bypassed the public areas entirely. He emerged on a high gantry overlooking the main transit hub. It was a vast, circular space filled with hundreds of beings waiting for pods that shot along magnetic rails. The noise was a constant roar of different languages and the hum of machinery. From his perch, Kalar was invisible. He assembled his weapon, a long, needle-like launcher. He loaded a single dart. It was not an explosive projectile. It was a delivery system. Inside the dart was a neurotoxin, a grade 10 bioweapon. It was a masterpiece of silent death. Upon entering the bloodstream, it would cause immediate total cardiac arrest in 97.8% of known carbon-based life forms. The death would look like a sudden, tragic heart failure. There would be no screams, no fight, no mess. Just a body collapsing in a crowd. He saw his target immediately. Li Jun was standing near Pod Bay 42, looking at an information screen, waiting for his ride. He was the picture of innocence. Kalar raised the launcher. There was no hesitation. His aim was perfect. The crosshairs in his vision settled on the side of Li Jun's neck, a clean, exposed patch of skin. He breathed out, a slow, controlled exhalation. He fired. There was almost no sound. A soft pft of compressed air that was swallowed by the noise of the hub. Li Jun felt a sharp prick on his neck like a bad insect bite. He slapped a hand to the spot, confused. His fingers came away with a tiny drop of blood and the broken tip of a microscopic dart. A wave of dizziness hit him. His vision swam. The roaring of the crowd seemed to get very loud and then very, very far away. What? He tried to say, but the word was a gasp. His legs turned to water. The world tilted. He saw the glowing lights of the pod schedules blur into streaks. He felt his sample case slip from his fingers. Then he felt nothing at all. He collapsed to the polished floor, a still form amidst the moving feet of the crowd. For a moment, people stepped around him, annoyed. Then someone screamed. A circle formed around his body. A medical alert was called. Sirens began to wail. Kalar watched for exactly 3 seconds. He saw the human fall. He saw the stillness of death claim him. It was done. He broke down the launcher, turned, and melted back into the darkness of the service corridors. As he walked away, he sent a single-word message to the anonymous client. Confirmed. He felt nothing. No pride, no satisfaction. It was just a job. Another name crossed off a list. The galaxy's greatest killer had eliminated another target. The soft human had been exactly what he appeared to be. Weak, fragile, and dead. Kalar's universe was still in perfect lethal order. He began to plan how he would spend his astronomical fee. The thought of the human Li Jun was already gone from his mind. A forgotten entry in a long, long list. The world returned to Li Jun as a slow, painful throb behind his eyes. A steady electronic beeping sound was the first thing he was aware of. Then came the smell, sharp and clean, the smell of antiseptic and recycled air. He tried to open his eyes, but the light was too bright. He groaned, a low, weak sound. A cool hand touched his forehead. A voice calm and familiar spoke. Jun, can you hear me? You're safe. You're in the embassy medical bay. He forced his eyes open, blinking against the glare. The world was a blur of soft white and silver. Slowly, it came into focus. He was lying on a med bed covered by a thin thermal sheet. Wires ran from his chest to a monitor that displayed his heartbeat in a steady green rhythm. Standing over him was Dr. Kim Yuna. Her face, usually calm and professional, was etched with deep concern. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, but a few strands had come loose as if she had been running her hands through it. What? What happened? Li Jun's voice was a dry croak. His throat felt raw. Yuna helped him sip some water from a cup. You collapsed in the transit hub. They brought you here. Your heart. It stopped, Jun. For nearly a minute. Li Jun stared at her, confused. His heart? He was young. He was healthy. He ate well. He walked every day. A heart condition made no sense. He remembered the market, the glowing fungus, the prick on his neck. There was a sting, he said, his hand moving weakly to his neck. A small healing patch was there now. Yuna's expression became even more serious. It wasn't a sting, June. She picked up a data slate and showed him a magnified image. It was the broken tip of the dart. This was in your neck. It delivered a powerful neurotoxin, a very, very powerful one. She swiped the screen and a complex molecular model appeared. This is the substance. We've identified it as a grade 10 bioweapon. In the entire Galactic Compact database, there is not a single carbon-based species that has shown immunity. It attacks the nervous system and causes immediate total cardiac arrest. It's one of the most lethal poisons known. Li Jun listened, the words not quite making sense. A bioweapon for him? He was a botanist. He studied fungi. Who would want to kill him with a galaxy-class poison? But I'm here, he said, stating the simple, impossible fact. Yuna put the data slate down. She looked at him with a mixture of professional awe and personal fear. Yes, June, you are, and we have no good explanation for it. Your physiology is anomalous. She pulled up another screen, this one showing his blood work. The toxin was in your system. In high concentrations, it should have killed you in 3 seconds. But it didn't. It was like your body put up a series of roadblocks. She pointed to a section of the data. First, you had a minor common Earth virus in your bloodstream. A rhinovirus, a cold. Li Jun remembered the tickle in his throat at the market. He nodded weakly. This virus, Yuna continued, has a very simple protein shell. Somehow when the toxin entered your body, these virus shells bonded with it. They didn't destroy it, but they acted like a buffer. They slowed it down, dramatically. Instead of hitting your heart all at once, it was like a slow, leaky drip. She then pointed to another set of numbers. Then your liver and your immune system went to work. June, the filtration and metabolic rate we're seeing is off the charts. It's like your body is built to process a constant, low-level barrage of toxins and pathogens. The poison was being broken down and filtered out almost as fast as it was being introduced, thanks to the virus slowing it down. She looked from the screen back to his face. A common cold and a superhuman immune response. That's what saved your life. The combination is statistically impossible, at least for any other species in the galaxy. The full weight of her words began to settle on him. Someone had tried to assassinate him with a weapon meant for galactic warlords, and he had survived because he had a sniffle and an immune system that saw a galaxy-killing poison as just another Tuesday. Who would do this? He whispered. Yuna's face was grim. We don't know. The station security is investigating, but there are no leads. The dart is untraceable. This was a professional, June. A very, very good one. Across the station in a quiet, expensive sector, Kalar was reviewing his accounts. The payment for the Li Jun job had not been deposited. This was unusual. Clients who paid these kinds of prices did not delay. It was bad for business. He was about to send a terse inquiry when a priority news alert flashed on a secondary screen. It was from the public information feed of the Cygnus Prime Security Force. The headline was simple. Human diplomatic staff member recovers after medical incident in transit hub. There was no picture, but the description matched Li Jun. The words recovers and medical incident stood out to Kalar like warning flares. A medical incident was not a confirmed kill. A recovery was a failure. A low guttural sound, something that was almost never heard, rumbled in Kalar's chest. It was the sound of pure, undiluted disbelief. He had seen the human fall. He had confirmed the biological signs of death from his scanner. The target was dead. He immediately pulled up his private network. He bypassed station security and tapped into the human embassy's external medical telemetry. It was a basic system, easy to hack. He found the data for Li Jun. The vitals were strong, steady. The human was not just alive. He was stable. The toxin was present in the bloodstream logs, but at declining levels. It was impossible. Kalar sat in his dark room, the glow of the screens the only light on his chitinous face. For the first time in a very long career, a target had gotten back up. His perfect record, his unbroken chain of successes had a crack in it, and it was cracked by a soft, fragile xenobotanist from a backwater world. The disappointment he had felt earlier was gone. It was replaced by something else, something colder and sharper. It was professional insult. It was personal offense. This was no longer just about the contract or the money. This was about a fundamental breach in the order of his universe. He was Kalar. Things he killed stayed dead. The anonymous client would have to wait. The money was now secondary. He reopened the file on Li Jun. He looked at the calm face, the unassuming eyes. He had misjudged this creature. It was not soft. It was resilient, a new kind of problem. He began to plan again, but this time it was different. He would not use a silent, distant method. He would not rely on technology that this human's bizarre biology could apparently negate. He would get close. He would see the life leave the human's eyes himself. He would make it physical. He would ensure it was final. He needed to get the human out of the embassy. The embassy had security, human marines, and diplomatic protections. It was a hard target. But Li Jun would have to leave eventually. All he needed was the right opportunity. He would create one. Back in the medical bay, Li Jun was sitting up, the bed adjusted to support his back. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving a cold, hard lump of fear in his stomach. "They will try again, won't they?" he asked Yuna. She didn't lie to him. "Yes, we have to assume so. Station security has offered protection. Our own Marines will guard you around the clock until we can get you on a ship back to Earth." Li Jun looked at his hands. They were the hands of a scientist. They were good at handling delicate plants, at using microscopes, at typing reports. They were not made for fighting. He felt a profound sense of helplessness. He was a leaf in a hurricane, a specimen under a microscope himself. He thought about the poison. He thought about his own body fighting it off. He was alive because of the relentless, brutal history of his own planet. Earth was a world of constant microbial war. Every breath, every bite of food was a challenge. Humanity had not conquered its world through strength or speed, but through stubborn, relentless adaptation. They had evolved to survive plagues and poisons that would wipe out other species. His ancestors had survived where stronger, faster creatures had fallen. He was not a warrior, but he was a survivor. It was in his blood, in his bones, in every cell that had fought off that alien toxin. He looked at Yuna. "I don't want to just run back to Earth," he said, his voice still weak but with a new thread of resolve. "I have work here." Yuna shook her head. "June, your work is not worth your life." "It's not about the work," he said, though that was part of it. It was about the principle. It was about the fact that someone had looked at him, a simple botanist, and decided he was worth erasing with a weapon of nightmares. He didn't know why, but the injustice of it, the sheer disproportionate violence of it stirred something in him. For now, though, he was trapped. A prisoner in a sterile room with guards at the door. The galaxy's greatest killer was still out there, and now Kalar was no longer just a hired hand. He was personally invested. The hunt had become personal. The quiet botanist and the perfect killer were locked in a game only one of them had known they were playing. And the rules were still being written. The air in Li Jun's temporary quarters at the embassy was still and quiet, but it felt heavy with waiting. 2 human Marines stood outside his door, their postures stiff and professional. They were young, their faces serious. They looked at Li Jun not as a scientist, but as a package to be protected. He appreciated their presence, but it made him feel like a specimen in a jar. He tried to focus on his work. His sample case sat on a desk, the glowing blue fungus inside its clear container. It pulsed softly, a tiny piece of a distant moon, now a prisoner with him. He took notes on his data slate, but the words blurred together. His mind kept returning to the prick on his neck, the dizzy fall, and Dr. Kim Yuna's grim explanation. A grade 10 bioweapon. For him. A soft chime came from the door. One of the Marines, a woman named Corporal Park, spoke through the intercom. "Sir, we're scheduled for a move. The captain wants you in a more secure location deeper in the embassy sector. Just a precaution." Li Jun's heart beat a little faster. A move meant leaving this room. It meant walking through hallways. It felt exposed. "Okay," he said, his voice sounding small. "I'm ready." He placed the fungus back in its case and stood up. The door slid open. The 2 Marines, Corporal Park and Private Kim, were there. They moved with a smooth, practiced efficiency, one checking the hallway ahead, the other falling in behind Li Jun. "Stay close to us, sir," Corporal Park said. Her eyes were constantly moving, scanning every doorway, every air vent. They moved through the polished corridors of the embassy. The place was mostly empty at this hour. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Li Jun clutched his sample case like a lifeline. He felt every shadow was a threat. He was a man who understood ecosystems, and right now he felt like the most vulnerable creature in this particular environment. Kalar watched them from a different kind of shadow. He had not been idle. He had studied the embassy's public floor plans. He had monitored their internal low-security communications channels. The order to move the target had been his creation. A simple, untraceable data burst mimicking the security captain's authorization code sent to the Marine's wrist comms. It was a small push, a nudge to make the prey move from its den. He was already in the embassy's underbelly. While the upper levels were clean and bright, the lower levels were a maze of maintenance decks, atmospheric processors, and recycling plants. It was a world of dripping pipes, humming machinery, and deep shadows. This was Kalar's world. He moved through it like a ghost, his dark armor blending into the gloom. His plan was simple: create chaos, isolate the target, and finish the job with his own hands. He needed to be sure. He needed to see it. He found his position near a large intersection of corridors. One led to the main embassy living quarters. The other, the one the Marines would take, led down into the lower-level secure wing. He waited, a statue of lethal patience. The Marine squad approached the intersection. Corporal Park held up a hand, signaling a stop. She peered down the left-hand corridor. It was clear. She gestured for Lee Jun and Private Kim to follow. That was when Kalar acted. From a concealed vent high on the wall, a small canister dropped and hit the floor with a clatter. It was non-lethal, a simple sonic disruptor. It emitted a high-pitched shriek and a blinding flash of light. The effect was instant. The two Marines, trained for combat, were still disoriented. Their helmets dampened the sound and light, but it broke their focus for a critical second. Alarms blared through the hallway, adding to the confusion. "Contact! Get him back!" Corporal Park yelled, her rifle coming up, sweeping the empty corridor. But in that moment of chaos, Kalar was already moving. He dropped from a ceiling grate behind them, silent as falling dust. He didn't go for the Marines. That was not the goal. He moved past them, a blur of darkness. His target was the confused, frightened man in the middle. Lee Jun stumbled backward, his ears ringing. He saw a dark shape flash past the Marines. It was tall, armored, and terrifyingly fast. It was coming right for him. There was no doubt in his mind. This was the killer. He did the only thing his body knew how to do. He ran. He turned and sprinted back the way they had come, away from the Marines, away from the secure wing. He heard shouting behind him, the sound of weapons fire, but it all seemed distant. His own breathing was loud in his ears. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from poison, but from raw animal fear. Kalar let him go. The Marines were a minor obstacle. He disabled Private Kim with a precise strike to the back of his knee, sending him crashing to the floor. He evaded Corporal Park's wild shot, disarming her with a twist of his wrist that shattered the rifle's stock. They were neutralized. The path was clear. He turned and saw Lee Jun disappearing down a service corridor, one that led away from the main embassy and into the industrial sectors. Perfect. The hunt was on. Lee Jun ran without thinking. He pushed through a heavy door marked Atmospheric Processing, Authorized Personnel Only. The world changed. The clean, bright corridors were gone. He was in a vast, cavernous space filled with enormous roaring machines. Giant ducts snaked along the ceiling. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of ozone and growing things. This was the starport's life support, and part of it was a massive hydroponics bay, a forest of alien plants grown to help recycle the air. He ducked behind a large tank of bubbling green liquid, his chest heaving. He was not a runner. He was not a fighter. He was a man who spent his days walking slowly through greenhouses. His lungs burned. He heard a soft clicking sound behind him. He risked a glance. Kalar was walking into the bay. He wasn't running. He was strolling. His dark eyes scanned the environment with cold efficiency. He knew he had his prey cornered. There was no rush. "You have been an interesting problem," Kalar's voice echoed through the chamber. It was a dry, rasping sound like stones grinding together. "But all problems have a solution." Lee Jun didn't answer. He moved, keeping the large tank between him and the hunter. He moved deeper into the hydroponics bay. It was like a jungle. There were giant, leafy ferns from a high-gravity world. There were twisting, vine-like plants that hung from the ceiling. There were fungi that glowed with soft light, similar to the one in his case, which he still clutched stupidly in his hand. He used his knowledge. He didn't just run blindly. He moved through the narrow gaps between the plant racks, places too small for Kalar's larger armored frame. He ducked under low-hanging leaves. He was smaller, more nimble. Kalar followed. He didn't bother with the narrow paths. He simply smashed through them. He brushed aside the giant ferns. He ripped through the hanging vines. His strength was immense. The sound of snapping branches and tearing leaves filled the air. He was a force of pure destruction moving through the carefully cultivated garden. Li Jun's fear was a cold knot in his stomach. He was tiring. His dodging and weaving were only buying seconds. The hunter was relentless. He was like a machine, unstoppable and single-minded. He scrambled behind a large industrial water purifier. He pressed his back against the cold metal, trying to quiet his breathing. He could hear Kalar's footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. "This is pointless," Kalar's voice was closer now. "You're just an animal running from its end. There is no honor in this. Stand and face it." Li Jun knew he was right. In a straight fight, he would last less than a second. His only advantage was this place, this garden. He knew plants. He knew what they could do. He looked around, his scientist's mind working desperately despite the fear. He saw the familiar, the harmless, and then his eyes fell on something else. In a secluded, sealed-off section of the bay, separated by a clear warning barrier, was a different kind of tank. It held a beautiful, swaying aquatic plant. It had long, glowing tendrils that moved in the water with a hypnotic grace. It was stunning, and Li Jun recognized it. It was a siren's whale. His database had files on it. It was a Class 4 biohazard. It was not just a plant. It was a predator. A plan, desperate and insane, formed in his mind. It was his only chance. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He had to lead the killer to the garden's deadliest flower. Li Jun pushed himself away from the water purifier and ran. He didn't run blindly now. He had a destination. He weaved through the familiar, safe plants, heading for the sealed section at the far end of the bay. His legs felt like lead, and every breath was a burning gasp. But the new goal gave him a flicker of strength. Kalar saw him break cover and increased his pace. The human's desperate flight was pathetic. It was time to end this game. He moved with powerful, ground-eating strides, smashing through a rack of fragrant purple herbs without a second glance. The smell of crushed leaves filled the air. Li Jun reached the warning barrier. It was a simple, knee-high rail with a flashing sign in multiple languages, all saying the same thing. Danger, volatile flora, authorized access only. He ducked under it, his heart hammering. The air here felt different, heavier. Behind him, Kalar simply stepped over the barrier as if it weren't there. His dark eyes were fixed on Li Jun, who was now backing away towards the large, transparent tank that held the beautiful, swaying plant. "You corner yourself," Kalar rasped, his voice full of cold certainty. He began a slow, deliberate walk forward, enjoying the final moments of the hunt. "There is no escape now. You have been a unique challenge. Your species, your resilience was unexpected. But it ends here. I will make it quick." A small respect for a puzzle that was almost interesting. Li Jun's back pressed against the cool, curved surface of the tank. The siren's whale was just on the other side of the glass, its glowing tendrils drifting peacefully. He could feel the faint vibration of the water pumps through his body. This was it. There was nowhere else to go. He looked at Kalar, at the sleek, deadly perfection of the hunter. This being knew everything about death, but he knew nothing about life. Not like Li Jun did. "You talk about respect," Li Jun said, his voice shaky but clear. "But you don't understand what you're hunting." Kalar stopped a few meters away. He tilted his head. "I understand perfectly. I am hunting you." "No," Li Jun said, his fingers feeling along the seam of the tank behind his back, searching for what he needed. "You hunt creatures. You see individuals, targets. I study ecosystems, connections. You were never just fighting me." His fingers found it. A small red-handled lever. The manual emergency release for the tank's containment field and filtration system. It was a last resort measure in case of a system failure. With a final, calm look at the confused hunter, Li Jun took a deep breath, held it, and slammed the lever down. A loud, grinding alarm blared through the section. The top of the tank, which had been sealed shut, hissed and slid open. The water inside, no longer filtered and pacified, began to churn. The siren's wail, so beautiful a moment before, reacted instantly. Its peaceful drifting stopped. The glowing tendrils stiffened, sensing the change, sensing the vibrations in the air and water. It was no longer a decorative plant. It was a threatened, territorial animal. Kalar watched, confused. What was this? A last act of sabotage? It changed nothing. He took a final step forward, his arm rising. claws extending to deliver the killing blow, and then the siren's wail struck. A thick, rope-like tendril, moving faster than the eye could follow, shot out of the tank. It wasn't aimed at Li Jun, who was pressed against the tank, holding his breath and staying perfectly still. It was aimed at the large, moving, threatening figure of Kalar. The tendril wrapped around Kalar's raised arm with a wet, slapping sound. He grunted in surprise and tried to pull back, but the grip was like iron. Another tendril lashed out, coiling around his leg. A cloud of fine, sparkling pollen puffed from the plant's main body, filling the air around Kalar. He thrashed, his immense strength finally meeting something that could match it. He sliced at the tendrils with his claws, but they were tough and fibrous, and for every one he cut, 2 more took its place. The more he moved, the more he fought. The more the plant perceived him as a dire threat. The paralytic pollen did its work. Kalar's movements became slower, more sluggish. His powerful limbs felt heavy. The tendrils tightened their grip, lifting him off the ground. He was being constricted, pulled towards the tank, towards the central core of the plant. He let out a strangled cry of pure, undiluted rage and disbelief. This was not possible. He was the galaxy's greatest killer. He was not meant to be defeated by a weed. He fought with everything he had, but it was like fighting the ocean. The plant was an ecosystem unto itself, a mindless, relentless force of nature. His strength, his speed, his technology, they were useless here. He was being consumed by the very environment he had considered irrelevant. Li Jun, still holding his breath, slowly slid away from the tank. His eyes were wide as he watched the terrifying spectacle. Kalar was completely entangled now. A cocoon of glowing tendrils, his struggles growing weaker and weaker until they finally stopped. The hunter was suspended in the air, trapped and paralyzed, a fly in a Venus flytrap on a galactic scale. The pollen began to settle. Li Jun finally dared to take a small, careful breath. The air was clear where he was. He had known to stay upwind, to not move. He had read the file. The siren's wail hunted by movement and vibration. He stood there, his body trembling with adrenaline and relief. The only sounds were the gurgle of the water, the rustle of the plant's tendrils as it secured its prize, and the distant ongoing shriek of the containment alarm. He looked at the immobilized form of Kalar. There was no triumph in his heart, no joy. Only a hollow, shaking exhaustion and a profound sense of awe at the power of the natural world. He had won. Not with a gun or a fist, but with knowledge. He had used the hunter's own contempt for his profession against him. Kalar saw a simple botanist. He never saw the ecosystem. Li Jun turned and walked slowly, unsteadily, back towards the warning barrier. He had to find the Marines. He had to tell them what happened. The fight was over. He had survived the galaxy's greatest killer by understanding that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the universe was not a claw or a gun, but a simple, beautiful flower. The shriek of the containment alarm brought them running. Corporal Park, limping but determined, and a full squad of Embassy Marines, weapons ready, flooded into the hydroponics bay. They followed the sound, their lights cutting through the humid gloom until they found the source. They stopped at the edge of the warning barrier, their training failing to mask their shock. The scene before them was something from a nightmare. In the center of the sealed section, the giant aquatic plant had fully emerged from its tank. Its glowing tendrils were wrapped tightly around a dark, armored form, holding it suspended in the air like a grotesque trophy. It was the bounty hunter Kalar. He was utterly motionless, his head lolled to the side, only the faintest glow of his eyes showing he was even alive. And there, sitting on the floor just outside the barrier, was Li Jun. He was pale and shaking, his clothes damp with sweat and condensation. He stared at the floor, looking completely spent. He still clutched his sample case in a white-knuckled grip. "June," Corporal Park called out, her voice tight with pain and relief. He looked up slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. He saw the Marines, their weapons pointed warily at the trapped hunter. He gave a small, weak wave. "It's okay," he said, his voice hoarse. "He can't move. The plant. It has him." It took over an hour for a specialized biohazard team to arrive. They used sonic emitters and chemical sedatives to force the siren's wail to retract its tendrils. Kalar's inert body dropped to the wet floor with a heavy thud. He was immediately secured with magnetic restraints far stronger than any rope or chain. The paralytic pollen would wear off in a few hours, but they were taking no chances. He was a prize catch and a deeply humiliated one. Lee Jun was back in the medical bay. Dr. Kim Yuna checked him over, her expression a mixture of professional concern and sheer astonishment. He had a few bruises and was dehydrated, but he was alive. Again. How? Was all she could ask once she was sure he was okay. Lee Jun explained it simply. He thought I was just a creature. I used the garden. He didn't understand the garden. News traveled fast through the closed circuits of the starport. The story was too incredible to contain. Kalar, the ghost, the legend, the killer who had never failed, had been captured, and not by a rival guild, not by a fleet of warships, but by a human botanist and a dangerous flower. The details were fuzzy, but the result was crystal clear. The Galactic Compact security forces were ecstatic. They had wanted Kalar for a long time. He was placed in a maximum security cell, a transparent cube of reinforced energy fields. When the paralysis finally wore off, he awoke to a new reality. He was in a cage. His armor was gone. He was being studied. He who had been the hunter was now the specimen. He offered no resistance. He sat on the bare floor of the cell, his pride in tatters. The memory of his defeat played over and over in his mind. The human's words, "You were never just fighting me." He had thought it was the empty boast of a doomed creature. Now he understood it was a statement of fact. A few days later, Lee Jun came to see him. The human was leaving Cygnus Prime on the next ship back to Earth. He stood outside the energy field, looking calm and ordinary once more. Kalar looked up, his dark eyes burning with a mixture of shame and a desperate, newfound curiosity. "You," Kalar rasped. "Me," Lee Jun said quietly. There was a long silence. Kalar finally broke it. "How?" "My toxin should have killed you. My strength should have crushed you." "Explain this." Lee Jun considered the question. "The toxin failed because my body comes from a world of poison and disease. We had to become strong to survive it. You failed because you only saw one kind of strength, the kind that breaks things. You never learned about the kind that adapts, the kind that uses what is already there." He looked at the mighty hunter now brought so low. "You see a single tree and you cut it down. I see a forest and I know how the trees, the fungi, the animals, and the air all work together. You were fighting the whole forest, Kalar. You just didn't know it." Kalar stared at him. The concept was alien, yet it made a terrible logical sense. He had spent his life mastering the art of killing individuals. He had never considered the power of a system, of an ecosystem. This human's weapon was not a thing he could hold. It was knowledge. It was context. It was a terrifyingly subtle form of power. "The client," Kalar said, changing the subject. "I do not know who it was. The contract was anonymous. The price was very high for a simple scientist." Lee Jun nodded. He had expected that. "It doesn't matter now. They know they failed, and they will think twice before trying again." He turned to leave. "Human," Kalar called out. Lee Jun stopped and looked back. "Your species? What are you?" Lee Jun offered a small, sad smile. "We are survivors. That is all we have ever been." He walked away, leaving Kalar alone with his thoughts. The hunter replayed the human's words. Survivors. It sounded so simple, but he now understood it was the most dangerous trait of all. Strength could be met with greater strength. Speed could be outpaced. But how do you defeat a species that simply will not die? How do you plan for the unpredictable resilience of a world that forged its children in a constant, brutal struggle for life? The story spread from the security forces to the traders, from the traders to the smugglers, from the smugglers to every shadowy corner of the galaxy. The tale of Kalar's fall became a legend, and at the heart of that legend was a new, profound respect for the seemingly soft, fragile beings from Earth. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They did not have the most advanced technology, but they were stubborn. They were clever, and they carried within them the relentless, unforgiving spirit of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. A world they had not conquered by destroying, but by enduring. The word human began to carry a new weight. It was no longer a synonym for newcomer or weakling. It became a quiet warning, a reminder that in the vast, dark galaxy, sometimes the most dangerous creature was not the one with the sharpest claws, but the one who simply, absolutely refused to be prey.